Hey team, Richard Tubb here with another episode of Tubb Talk, the podcast for managed service providers. Now today's guest is somebody I've wanted to have as a guest on this podcast for a very long time now. In fact, I'm surprised that he's not been on the show before. David Brereton is the owner of UK-based managed service provider Myson Pages, an established MSP offering help and support to over 250 organisations, primarily in the northwest of England. Now, I've had the opportunity to work with David and his team before. He's a man that I admire very much, and I certainly admire the legacy that he's been building for some time now. So I'm thrilled to introduce him to the show. David, welcome to Tubb Talk.
Thanks, Richard. It's great to be here.
Well, we're recording this in person, unusually. You know, listeners will know we do a lot of these sort of calls over Zoom and that, but we're recording this in person, sat here in my adopted hometown of Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. So let's set the scene. What brings you to this part of the woods?
Probably trying to kill about four birds with one stone, shall we say. So I have a member of my team who actually lives in Newcastle, and he's lived here since just before COVID, and I've not been up to see him, and I'm putting that right today. It's long overdue, but the reason I've not been up to see him is that I have actually been in Newcastle quite some time, but my daughter's now here in university, and periodically I drive past the end of Sam's road and say, Sam lives down there, and then we head off to Northumberland for a week, and we never get a chance to say hello. So I'm taking the summer as a time to visit Sam and have a catch up and see where he's at. But I'm also here to catch up with a supplier who does our billing for our cloud comms products, who are based in Gateshead. And I've got a rumour that there's going to be a few other IT bods meeting in a pub tonight in Newcastle, and a night on the toon is always a great idea.
You will meet the great and the good from the managed service industry in Newcastle, and of course me. But that's not your only links with the Northeast, is it? So we were just at lunch. We're literally sat in a hotel room by the side of the River Tyne. It's a beautiful sunny day. And David, I've known him for a little while, but was also sharing some of his background. But as we were walking here, you've got a number of links to the Northeast, haven't you?
Yeah, my mum was a student here many, many years ago, and I just shared with you before, she was almost on one of the first ever computing courses, but that came to naught, and she ended up doing teacher training at Alnwick up at the castle there, which is now obviously much more famous for Harry Potter. And I came to Newcastle University here at the back end of the 80s, and my daughter is now a student here. So Newcastle's one of those places that, aside from home, I feel at home in Newcastle. So I know it's an adopted place for you. You've been here for about 8 years now.
That's right.
But I feel I've been here all my life, on and off, and I just love coming back to the place. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, well, your MSP, Myson Pages, is based in Rochdale, near Manchester, for a global audience that may be listening from out of the UK. That's in the northwest of England. So, yeah, beautiful part of the world. Tell us about the business, because we're in danger of this podcast already becoming the Newcastle promotion board here. So let's get back to you and your business. So tell us about Myson Pages, you know, how many people work there, how long you've been going, that type of thing.
Yeah, we're a 15-strong team at the minute, and we're in our 25th year, which we'll probably talk about a bit more future in the rest of this podcast. But, you know, with 25 years in the MSP space, was the MSP space invented 25 years ago? We were probably an MSP before that phrase was coined.
Yeah.
And we got together because we were a bunch of IT consultants working on contract work for blue chips. And it was just, you know, we ended up working for a few SMEs as a bit of a busman's holiday. And we actually liked the fact that you could work with smaller businesses who appreciated what you did and said thank you. And while, you know, the money from the blue chip stuff was always great, there was an element of, you know, you were being paid a day rate, and, you know, let's build something that's got a bit more permanence. So 25 years on, we're kind of North Manchester's shining star, maybe. We've got 250 clients, based in Rochdale, based in the home of the Co-op that a lot of people know worldwide. We're actually in one of their old buildings with Zen Internet, who bought that off the Co-op. It's a fantastic town. It's a great part of the world. Bit like up here, you know, people-centric. And it's a caring place, really. So we're part of that community.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to being in Rochdale next week. I'm going to pop along. We'll talk more about that anyway. But Myson Pages, that is an unusual name for an MSP. So what's the story behind the name?
Well, the limited company is called Myson Consulting Limited, and that was our original trading name when we worked for people like BNFL, Severn Trent, the Co-op, AXA, Sun Life, all those kind of people. And basically a group of contractors came together and we said, listen, we can cut out the recruitment company, we can cut out the third party, we can work direct with people, but we need a name. And at the time, believe it or not, we were working for BNFL's own IT company, a company called IT Services, who had an external client, which was Age Concern. And we were based down in Croydon for 6 months, working out their head office, but working nationwide, putting an NT4 infrastructure in place. I mean, we are going back a few years now. And we worked at their head office, and their head office was one of those places that had an old school kind of ex-army geezer called George, who had a peak cap and worked behind reception and did the early morning shift and let you in, and later on at night kicked you out when it was a little late. And I think one weekend we'd come back from the north and we'd come back down, and George had some new fitting dentures that didn't quite work. And one of his big phrases was, "All right, my son." And then the next Monday it was, "All right, my son." So we all started doing this whistling thing. And anyway, one thing led to another. We decided we were going to set up a company and nobody could think of a name. And then the Myson thing started because we were all doing the George whistling, and we just thought, that'll do. But it's been great. Apart from the odd people ringing up for radiators, it's been fantastic. So yeah, Myson Consulting then became Myson Pages when we needed something for our small business brand. And we initially started getting, the old shoebox full of, here's some Microsoft licenses and the POP3 password.
Oh, yeah.
All the information's in this box. It's all sacred, and you'd throw 90% of it away and you'd realise that it didn't have anything. So we used to set up a web page on our own internal website that held all the details of all the key bits of information that these little companies didn't have a grip off and never had. So we actually invented IT Glue probably about 10 years before IT Glue invented IT Glue, but we didn't realise there was a market for it or a use for it, apart from it was solving a problem for us.
Wow, so you were one of the inventors of wikis, really, and documentation. Have you ever had a conversation with Chris Day, who founded IT Glue?
No, but when it did come, it was like,
Yeah, because Chris had the vision, didn't he, to see lots of MSPs around the world create their own product internally. But, to be fair to Chris, he had the vision, didn't he, to go, this is useful externally.
He did. I think right time, right place. We'd probably thought of it, but couldn't see a use for it outside of our own world.
Yeah, but that's where the Myson, so we got, a mispronunciation or a funny way somebody said something, and then the Pages was the wiki side of things. Interesting. I never knew that, and I've known you for quite some time now. So, yeah. So 25 years, a long time for anybody to run an IT business, managed service provider, whatever you want to call it. You've had some challenges, but I know, from speaking to you personally as a friend, those first few months, years, Myson Pages was a challenge both personally and professionally. So talk us perhaps through some of those early days and, some of the things that, you look back now that were big hurdles at the time, but perhaps put you in the direction for the man you've become now.
Yeah, I think so. I think personal life and business life always kind of coincide, and it's probably taken me till some years hence to realise the impact. But if I kind of just go through a bit of a timeline, I'll probably kind of capture what I'm going on about. So we set up the company 23rd of June 1999. And at the time, everything was great. It was a great opportunity. We were going to go and work for AXA Direct and earn lots of money because we'd cut out the third parties. We had a team ready to go. We'd all worked together at BNFL. I got married in October that year. I'd also had my eye on a farmhouse that was coming up for sale at auction, and we were the lucky people who got the farmhouse. We won the bidding process, so that all kind of then kicked off a whole year's worth of renovation that we did ourselves. So newly married, new business, new home, and then just after the millennium, January, we got the news that my dad had been diagnosed with a cancer, which was mesothelioma, which is an asbestos-related cancer, which, considering he was a school teacher all his life, was kind of interesting. But we realised that the school that I'd been to and he taught at for 35 years was the school that they'd removed asbestos from whilst we were all in it. I mean, this wouldn't happen today. And he'd kind of contracted a cancer from that. So we kind of knew it was terminal, and we had some time that we were going to have with him, and kind of we've got to watch that happen in front of us, which was pretty tough to take in the first year of marriage and first year of a business, and this idea that we're concentrating on building this house. And then the contract that we had with AXA at the start, AXA made some decisions and changed things up a bit. So we were working in Lytham at the time, but that got cancelled. And if we wanted to keep our jobs, we had to go and live in Bristol. So I was actually living in Bristol during the week, at my mother-in-law's at the weekend, newly married, also renovating a farmhouse at the weekend, a new business, etc., etc. And then my mum got diagnosed with a completely unrelated, separate terminal illness. My wife, Catherine, her grandma and granddad both passed away in that year as well. And by the end of the year, we got to December, and sadly, my mum and dad both lost their battles. I hate that word. People say it's a battle with cancer, but it's something that you go through. And the most beautiful thing was that they had 33 years together, and they only had 11 hours apart. Because sadly, telling my mum that my dad had died, my dad died on a Sunday evening, and my mum died on the Monday morning, was basically the last straw. She gave up because he'd gone. But the output of that was that they had a joint funeral. She couldn't have gone to his funeral. She wasn't in any fit state to do that. So we sent them off together. My dad, because he knew he was dying, and he was a church organist, had written 4 pages of notes about what the funeral would be like. So we had to cross 2 pages out to make room for my mum, because there was no input from what she wanted. But it was a great send-off. And, dark humour aside, I'm one of the few people who's ever rung an undertaker the day after ringing him before and saying, "Do you do 2 for 1?" Which it was, it was a family friend, but there's lots of stuff in that. But it kind of put your world. I've described it to other people as coming out of that end of December into the next year as feeling like an orphan. Age 30, newly married, still moving into a new house and building that new business. And then a little later, my uncle died. Then we had a cat that died. I mean, that was frankly the last straw, coming back from the vets with an empty pet carrier. But then it gets good, because then our son arrived the following February. So in the space of about 3 years, I think I had all the life that most people have over 30 condensed into 3 years. And I've now got, a wonderful son, a wonderful daughter, a wonderful family, some wonderful family and friends. And I think it's informed the way our business has grown, because it has made sure that we kind of put people in the middle of everything. Yeah. They are just as much my family as my family.
And we'll talk some more about that. I want to acknowledge, you and I have talked about losing a parent. You've been very supportive of me. I think it's common knowledge. I sold my MSP business just after my dad passed away. And it is a life event that changes you. There's no two ways about it. Yeah. But it also one of those life events that forces you to think, well, what is it I want to be when I grow up? Where do I want to go with this, the finite time that we've been given here?
And I think all of a sudden you think, well, I am now grown up, because these things have happened to me, even though you've not necessarily done anything yourself. Yeah. And I've met quite a lot of people in the MSP space, and personally, where you find somebody who's just lost somebody, and it's just their first time of what I call a life event, and it's then that you realise how people change and move on and grow, and ultimately, we're all going to go through it. We're all on a countdown, but it does change your thinking and how you are with people, and enables you to be there for others, which I think, turning any negative into a positive is always a good thing.
Yeah. Well, let's delve into Myson Pages a little bit, because the reason I asked you about that story, as painful as it is to recollect, is who you are as a person now, you've told me before, has been changed by, what's happened to you in the past, the challenges that you overcome, many things. But the business Myson Pages now is a remarkable business. I'm in awe of what you achieve. I've done some work with, your team in the past. You're a big part of the community that we'll talk about. And I know you differentiate yourself from your MSP competitors with an approach that, well, it's different to other IT companies. There's no two ways about it. So tell us more about your approach to running Myson Pages. What do you do differently?
Yeah, I think right at the start, we wanted to take what we were doing for big business, so the organisation, the rigour, the control, and do that for little businesses, because we very much saw that little businesses were, I'm going to put a PC in, you'll ring me up when it breaks, I'll come and fix it, I'll earn some money from that. That was kind of coming from the other end. We were saying, well, let's organise it and use the stuff that we've done for big businesses, the design and, the confidence and the consistency to make sure that we can do that for the smaller businesses. And why shouldn't we? And, we were always going to do that because that's where we'd come from. And I think by doing that in the early days, we realised that are people really interested in the IT? And it dawned on us early on that they're probably not. They're probably more interested that it works. I think any MSP, if you ask them, the worst customer is the people who know a bit. Because then you get into conversations that are often fruitless and pointless. So you're better off people who are saying, listen, I don't know anything about this. I just want you to do it. We've got used to the word outsource now. And, you yourself have various virtual people who help you with specific tasks because that's their specialism. And I think it's probably there now in the MSP space, but maybe 20 years ago it wasn't. So we want it to be different. And, to that end, if you look at our website, you will struggle to find a picture of a computer. You will struggle to find much talk about any of the technologies we use. It's more about how we do it and how we work with people. So, we will take people on. And in the early days, we used to try and talk them round into being the customer that we wanted them to be. Now I'd say, we will probably not take people on if they don't fit. Or if we do take people on and it doesn't quite go as expected, if we get to kind of 3 years and they're still not treating us as a partner, they're treating us as a supplier, then it's never going to work and we'll go our separate ways. So some of my greatest times at Myson have been actually letting people go because they've not been the right fit for us. And we know that there are people out there who will be the right fit. And partnerships, friendships even, they're long lasting. And, for most people, they want recurring revenue in the business. If you can build that network of clients, then you've sorted it.
Yeah. And you've built what I would call an incredible company culture, ethos. Now, company culture, we say that, there's going to be many people listening to this and go, oh my goodness, because it sounds like a buzzword, a business cliche, so to speak. But having worked with the Myson team, having known you for a long time, I think in your case, you're doing it really, really well. So how would you describe the values and culture of Myson as an MSP business?
Well, it's funny because we're actually going through a process now, even though we're 25 years in, we're starting to implement EOS or Traction.
Yeah,
which
entrepreneurial.
Entrepreneurial operating system. Yeah. So by Gino Whitman. And we're doing that, and we'll probably touch on reasons why we're doing that now. But for the first time ever, we're looking at what our values are, which we probably should have agreed what they are already. But it's one of the exercises we've done. And we've come up with 6, but the 6th one is 2 words, and you can set aside the other 5 because the sixth one does it, and it's we care. And it sounds so simple, but we still find people, or we still take on clients who've had an existing relationship with somebody else, where literally, if you wanted to be critical on one thing, you could say that the people that have been looking after them before didn't care. I've recently written a LinkedIn article about a server that we've now inherited that hasn't had any Windows updates for 10 years, nearly to the day. But we're now going to care about putting that situation right. That server's also been used to mine Bitcoin, and the client now wonders why things have been running a little slow, and it's probably been mining Bitcoin for the last 5 or 6 years. Nobody knows whose benefit it's been done for.
Do you know, I've often thought, forgive me for interrupting, I've often thought we hear so many of those horror stories from within our industry, and that is a particularly sort of gruesome one. We should do a podcast, you know, like MSP horror stories or something. However, I just think it'd be too depressing and too chilling to do that.
Yeah. So from the first moment that we've actually seen that, we're now worrying about, well, how do we get out of this situation? Because, for example, just to get a bit technical, can we go and take a backup of it? Well, we can't install our backup agent because it's 10 years out of date, and the agent that we've got wants it to be a little bit more. So there's a catch-22. We can't back it up, and we want to back it up before we do anything to it because we don't want to break it, because actually there's still a business running on this. There's an application that's running very slowly. So we've now got the worry about how we get them from this dire set of circumstances into clearer waters, because we care. So whatever our other 5 values are, which are all great, I think the underlying one is that from day one, you know, as soon as somebody makes that phone call to say we've got a problem, then our help desk or myself or any other team, we care about what the outcome is. And we've got inquisitive minds as well. Sometimes it's okay to say, well, I've fixed that for you, but it doesn't answer the full picture to why it was a problem in the first place. So yeah, I've fixed it. I might be fixing it again next week. Can I actually work out why there's a problem in the first place? And can we go that extra, mile to fix that problem for once and for all?
The root cause analysis type thing, which is interesting, isn't it? Because managed service providers become MSPs in most cases because the break-fix model is broken. Because if you think about it, you fix something for, that breaks for a client, but there's no onus on you, is there, or there's no incentive to fix it permanently.
Yeah, there's no way you could charge for the 25 years worth of experience that allowed me to fix it in 30 seconds. So that's why that model went. And I'm so glad it did go. And I think as an industry, it's done us all a favour. Because we're actually, we're the perceived value of what we do now is more than, well, I'm an electrician or a chippy and I'm time served.
Agreed.
The end of the timesheet was a great moment, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson there for any aspiring MSPs who are listening. The value is not in the time. The value is in the value that you provide. What are you doing to help the clients? But back to culture. And I would say part of your culture at Myson Pages is engaging and supporting the community. Now, long-time listeners to this show will know I'm a huge advocate for the managed service provider community, CompTIA, Tech Tribe, SBSC Northwest, so many different organisations out there that help MSPs. But the SBSC Northwest community specifically, let's talk about that for a second. Originally, small business server community, so we're going way back in the day, but SBSC Northwest is the longest running MSP community peer group in the UK, and you are the would you call you the deputy, the
I think
co-lead?
Co-lead, let's go for
co-lead, that sounds good. So you're the co-lead of that group alongside our mutual friend, Robert Gibbons, who we've interviewed Robert in Tubb Talk episode 92. And actually, he's been one of the few guests we've had on a couple of times, which shows you the value he brings. But most recently, we interviewed him in Tubb Talk episode 157. Robert, an amazing guy. I know he's a good friend of yours. What's your relationship with Rob like? And how does the managed service community help you and your MSP business? Because you give a lot to the community, but what do you get back from it?
Well, thinking about it, I can't actually remember why I went for the first time. I don't even know. It was probably through a Microsoft forum around the time of Small Business Server, because Myson Pages grew up around Small Business Server, as did a lot of MSPs in that time. So I think I saw there was a meeting, and I remember just popping along, and there was a room probably with about 15, 16 people in it at M247 in Manchester at the time. But even on that first night, I remember thinking, me and Rob are kind of cut from the same cloth, hewn from the same stone, and we really kind of hit it off. And very quickly, we've become great friends. And through the different roles and positions that Rob's had, initially at Think4 and Avaris, and later at Car, and now at Abyss, we've been two people who talk to each other week in, week out, and collaborate and share stories and discuss what we're going through, even though we're potentially competitors, and this is what outsiders maybe don't get about our community, is that, you know, we could be up against each other, but actually there's power in sharing. So yeah, we've got to the stage now where we kind of run it between us. When we moved into Zen's place 3 or 4 years ago, we've managed to relocate the community meetings to there, and it's just great because we've got a good set of people coming, and those conversations on those Thursday nights where you're just sharing experience, they're priceless. You can't get that anywhere else, and we get that feedback back from the new members who come and some of the old hands who've been there for some time. So it's a great thing to be involved in, and I consider Robert, you know, one of my closest friends in the MSP space. And if I've ever got a problem, or if I need some advice about who to speak to, he's got his world and a bunch of contacts, and likewise, he can do the same to me. So, you know, he moved to Abyss recently. Did I know about that as being a possibility? I might have done. Did he use me as a sounding board? It's great that we can have those conversations. That's the level of our kind of friendship, and he's a great community member. You know, he's on the exec at CompTIA. He's previously been a pal with Microsoft. He gives to the community, so he's a good guy to know.
Yeah, he's absolutely wonderful. What would you say to any MSPs listening to this, or indeed any IT consultants, any IT service providers? We bang on, I know you listen to the show a little bit as well, but we bang on this show about community, about the value community. You've just explained, you know, you built a wonderful relationship with Robert Gibbons. It's benefited Myson Pages. But what would you say for anybody listening who's never been to a peer group, has never been to a community group, and thinking, I don't want to go there because it's full of my competitors? How would you summarise what the benefits are?
You just get involved. You know, if you come once and you don't enjoy it, then fair enough, leave. But I guarantee if you come to SBSC, you come to a CompTIA meeting. So even this week, we've had another Rochdale-based IT company ring us about, there's obviously PAX 8 Beyond is happening in Berlin, asking about where we're going for that, because there's a number of us from SBSC who are going. And I've also signposted Dave to say, well, actually the week after, you know, if you've got some new salespeople and you want to introduce them to the community, there's a CompTIA meeting, which is down in London. And, you know, hang on, PAX 8's going to cost you this much. CompTIA, you become a member of CompTIA, you can take as many people as you want.
Yeah.
And that is a place where it's all about sharing. And we've made some great friends through CompTIA. So people like Mark Williams at Pensar, who, you know, we've never worked together, but we know each other solely through community events. And if I ever needed anything and I knew Mark was the person to do it, I'd just ask. And so having that kind of backup to the staff that you have it's invaluable. You won't get it anywhere else.
Yeah. And talking of staff, I know you're a big believer in nurturing the next generation of talent, staff coming through. So tell us about the journey of an employee at Myson Pages, because from the outside looking in, I think it's fairly remarkable. And I think MSPs listening can learn a lot from how you nurture the talent.
Yeah, well, there's actually another Newcastle connection here. So of late, anybody who joins us, we use Baltic apprenticeships, which if I look out the window of this hotel room and crick my neck a bit, they're over the river in Gateshead. And they are an online training organisation. But if you've not got a partner for apprenticeships, I can recommend working with those guys. They are very well organised. They're very keen to get you signed up. The courses are brilliant. And we basically pipe all of our new talent through a level 3 apprenticeship, and then some are then going on to a level 4. We're also doing vendor training as well, and some more local stuff, as well as on-the-job training. But it gives us a way to effectively interview somebody over 18 months. And I always say to anybody who starts with us as an apprentice, I said, look, you know, you've got 18 months to get this qualification, but if by the end of this qualification you don't get the qualification for whatever reason, if you've done the right thing and made yourself indispensable in this team, then almost the qualification is it's just a tick box. Yeah, it's an icing on the cake. And what seems to happen is everybody seems to do really well. Brad, who passed recently, who I'll name check, got distinction in both of his. Cameron, who's just joined us now, he's starting his journey. But it's a way of us making sure that all those guys have the same basis, the same starting point. And then I always say to people, but once you've come through this kind of initial funnel, if you fancy being more interested in the cloud comm stuff, the phone stuff, or if you want to do server work or project work, or you want to be that kind of really deep level second, third line support on the help desk, you can kind of go where you want to go. We're a small enough team to let people still carve out their niches on what it is they want to do.
Yeah, I love it. And I've heard you say that you never really recruit, but you're always retaining. So Dave, tell me what you mean by that.
I think some people, we've actually talked to a recruitment agency for the first time in our 25th year, and that's yet to bear fruit, but she's a lovely lass and she's based locally and she's got some really good connections. But we've recruited from, historically, I've recruited from people I've known, which has meant there's a lot of staff who not only work for us, but have another connection to Myson, which actually kind of makes it a bit more belt and braces. But our latest recruit was actually working in our building for another company who's in there in health, and he's an IT graduate, and he actually ran after one of our members of staff with his CV to say, how do I get this CV to somebody? Now, were we looking to take anybody on at the time? Probably not. But we had a meeting and we had a discussion, and actually, yeah, well, let's give him a go. So I can't think of any time bar once when we've actually gone to say we need somebody and we've put an advert out. Most of the time, we take people when they're available, but the key to it is making sure that you don't need to take that many people.
Yeah.
So if you can keep people, like the sales thing always goes on about, if you can keep clients, then and you don't churn clients, then you don't have to go and find as many, and the sales pipeline isn't as busy. The same applies to recruitment. If you can keep people and you can provide an environment where they're always learning, they're happy with what they do. And one of our big things is short weeks. And I'm not saying we're a 4-day-a-week company. That's maybe something we'd like to get to. But what we like to say to people is, you'll find this week seems short because it goes so fast, because you're that busy, and actually the work's quite interesting. Because if anybody's ever working for us and kind of looking at the calendar and thinking, bloody hell, it's only Tuesday, then we've got a problem. We like most people to think, how's Friday got here so quick? I've been that busy. And I think that if you can get that environment going, that's what really makes it work for those young guys.
Yeah, and that's one of the big reasons I wanted to get you on the show and have done for quite some time, because we talk about company culture, we talk about, marketing and recruitment and things like that. But I'm a great believer that if you've got a culture like Myson Pages, it not only makes it easy to recruit really good new clients.
Yeah.
You attract them, but you attract members of the team, don't you, who want to come and work. So there's a prime example of somebody chasing one of your chaps down the corridor and saying, here's a CV, can I have a look? Presumably it's because he'd heard about Myson Pages, he knew Myson Pages, he loved what he saw and wanted to be a part of that organisation.
Yeah, and to be honest, the week we had our 25th birthday party, I had 2 long-standing clients who both came and said to me unprompted, the great thing about your team is that whoever we speak to, we get the same level of service and we know that they're part of your team. And one of them said they've got your values. And I just thought, well, that's it. We've got to 25 years and all this that we do, all these people who are here working are sharing in the same set of values. So if I've done one thing, it's that. And I think that underpins everything that we do. We care, but there's a shared sense of what's right and what's wrong, what's acceptable and what's not. We don't take shortcuts. We work as a team. We'll always find the right thing to do. We're never going to be found wanting, I don't think. Yeah. And I think that's what's made it work.
It's clear to anybody listening, you deeply care about your team, you deeply care about your clients, you nurture people. Some MSPs listening they will admire your approach a lot, David. It's very remarkable. They might want to emulate it as well. But I'm guessing some people might struggle when you're faced with a conflict between caring for your staff, looking after them, but then what the business needs. So let's say somebody has a personal challenge in their personal life, but the business needs them as well. How do you suggest they tackle those challenges?
I think you just used the word conflict there. Yeah. I don't see a conflict. I see it as being, that's the same person. And if you want to get that person to do a good job for you, then if they're not in the right place, then they can't do that. So I see it as a continuum. So if you can help that person be happy outside of work or with whatever it is they're looking at, you get the best out of them out of work. So happy staff, happy outcomes for everybody else. So even though we're a small team, and obviously earlier on I've described how quite a lot of life happened to me, I can see that life happens to other people. So, I'm not going to betray any confidences, but within the team we've got a few people who've had some relationships where things haven't worked out right and there's access to kids that are an issue. And just being there and understanding that and listening, asking questions, being interested, is often all it needs. It doesn't need much more. I've got other people who've got other issues that are a bit more long-standing or a bit more serious, should we say. I've got one guy who's working for me now who's in a pretty bad place. And I'm happy to share this with you. I won't name names, but I'm sharing it because he the other week put a post on Facebook and actually said, I'm in a bad place. And he wrote it to put it on Facebook to tell the world he was in a bad place so that the world knew and so he could get help, which was incredibly brave. He could have kept that hidden. And we've talked a lot over the last year. And the fact that he's gone and done that, I know that he's on the road to recovery. And I'll support him every which way I can. And I know that he will work for us for as long as his days are here. He's never going to look for another job. He's happy where he is. We have been a strong part of his life when other things have been weak. So he's, it's a family thing. He's part of what we do. And hopefully he gets himself to a more stable, a more positive place. But we'll be there to help him. All the team know, we're a team. We'll look out for each other.
That is remarkable. Wonderful to hear. Let's change tact a little bit. So we've talked about Myson Pages, the business. We've talked about the people within the business. We've talked about your clients. Let's talk about the tools that you use. So let's go off script here a little bit and just talk about the vendors that you use, the partnerships that you have in the marketplace. Give our listeners an insight into what makes Myson Pages tick in terms of the tool set.
Well, probably one of the earliest relationship we struck with a company called Hound Dog, who many people say who are Hound Dog. Well, they're now Enable. They've had several name changes in the past. But throughout that kind of 17-year history, I think we've had 3 account managers, of which we keep in contact with them all. And our current guy, Mark, who's based over in the Netherlands, a South African living in the Netherlands, is a great fella. And Barry before him still works with him, just got a promotion, that's all. So we've had that constant relationship with those guys. And things have been good, things have been bad, things are great. We've never chopped and changed. And that RMM piece has been in the middle of everything that we've done. But we're now so long in the tooth of them, I don't think we'd ever change. We consume so much of their products. They're integral to what we do. Pax 8 is obviously one supplier that most people will now know. And for me, they're building kind of an Amazon for the MSP world, and they're doing it very well. The amount of support we can have from those guys. So we've got an account manager there who last week helped us with something that wasn't even for a client and not even a Pax 8 client, but got Microsoft involved. And you're thinking, well, what's in it for him? But what was in it for him was providing a level of service for us that makes us speak on a podcast about him. Yeah. And, we shared at lunch that I spoke to Phil Morgan about him and said what a great guy he is. And I think those things are important. It's easy in this world now where everything's got a portal and a call centre behind to kind of forget that there's real people working in those things. And when you have a good experience, you should say, we're all very quick to say when we have a bad experience, if we have a bad experience, we'll sit in the pub and tell everybody. But do we sit in the pub and tell everybody when we've had a good experience? We probably don't. We should tell the people who work with those guys. So Pax 8 are now a big supplier. Brigantia we use, who are also based in the north. And the service we get and the wraparound on the products we buy from them is fantastic. They supported us we had a business breakfast early in the year. They came and a couple of the guys came and gave a few demonstrations and talks. But that's a long-standing relationship. And then we've got a few other suppliers, but in the main, those are the big three these days. We've tried to really keep that tight and build good relationships, really.
Yeah, and again, I think it becomes clear to anybody listening, you are all about relationships.
Yeah.
You're about great relationships with the staff, you're about great relationships with your suppliers, you're about great relationships with your clients as well. And it shines through, and it's an easy thing to say, isn't it? Like, if we go back to that culture and values and all the rest of it, it's business buzzwords and that. But this is the business that you've built, and it's sort of self-fulfilling then, isn't it? It attracts the right people. How would you describe that sort of way of doing business to people who think, it sounds a little bit woo-woo to me?
I think, obviously, they're based on my personal values. And I think anybody who's building a business, if you don't put yourself in the middle of it and what you stand for, if for some reason you go to work and you run your work by a different set of values, how can you ever square that up?
Yeah.
If you're an entrepreneur, we all know that it's not a 9-to-5 job. Even when you're on holiday, there's a little bit at the back of your brain that's thinking about that next thing that you can do. You can never switch it off. So you've got to be authentic. You've got to be who you are in that business. And sometimes that shines through in spades because you can have experiences with other people who it is literally all about the pound, shilling and pence.
Yeah.
And, we don't end up working with those guys. And that's, you find the tribe of like minds. So the guys who we work with and able to go back to them, the messages we got when we got 25 years old were brilliant, but they were personal. And there's never really any conversation about, I could go here and save this amount of money, because we see the value in the relationship more than the cost of the product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Something else I would say that you do incredibly well, and not only me a bit jealous of it, but many people in the industry, you do office space incredibly well for Myson Pages. I remember visiting the Myson offices many years ago in the semi-rural area you were.
Delft,
Delft, that was it, yeah. And when you looked out the window, you saw sheep grazing and beautiful rolling fields. I was like, this is a good place to have an office. Since then, you've moved into beautiful historic offices in Rochdale, which you share with some very prestigious clients that you've already alluded to. So tell us about what prompted that move and what it's like where you are now.
Well, the place that you came to visit us the first time with the sheep and the rolling hills is Saddleworth, which, if for any of our listeners down south or abroad, if you've ever watched the film Brassed Off, which is all about brass bands, that is the village that was used, and it is still the village, or one of the many villages, where on Whit Friday there is a brass band competition. And when we worked there, most of the guys who work for me on Whit Friday would say, can I go home at 2:00 because I'll never get home through all the road closures and all the people playing brass bands.
It's an unusual backlog there, isn't it?
It's an interesting part of the world, but rolling Pennines, lovely views, and we were in an old mill. Those valleys are old mill towns. And we loved it there, and it was our home, and we were never going to move. Yes, it was a bit tatty, but we had plenty of space. But then we've always had a partnership with Zen Internet, who are a Rochdale-based company. And their partner manager at the time said, we've got an office coming free. Would you fancy moving into it? And we had no plans at all to move from Delft. So out of courtesy, because I'm a nice guy, I went to look at it. And then just a series of events started and thought, well, hang on a minute. That's, putting us back in Rochdale. And we've said we're a Rochdale company, but we don't actually work in Rochdale. We've gone over the hill because it was somewhere between me and my original business partner. It was for commuting reasons and travel reasons. Well, throw COVID in the mix, all of a sudden nobody's going to work. Actually, we could move, we could relocate, we could cut down our journey times, put the green agenda on. That's much better. We can be right next to people. And it was a nice office. And it should be a nice office because our friends at Zen bought what was the Co-op's headquarters.
Yeah, the cooperative.
The Co-op, when they were 150, I think, moved back to Rochdale for a number of years. And then they ended up moving back to Manchester for their own organisational reasons. My Travel bought this office, and then they ended up moving to Peterborough. And then Richard at Zen bought the office, and I was thinking, oh my God, it's killed 2 companies. Is it going to kill Zen? But thankfully, he's made a success of it. So Zen were going to buy something or build something nearby, but this came up. They've taken the building, and it's now got a campus feel because Zen are in there, we're in there. Foot Asylum have three floors. I mean, I'm 54 now. I don't quite understand what they do, but they're not making trainers there. I think they've got 3 floors of people tweeting about pumps. I think that's what they do. I think they create the social media storm. But there's all those guys. So it's got a college campus feel to it. It's got a restaurant on site. We've got a coffee shop, and there can be up to 1,500 people there. So it's a real great place to work with us, with our little number of 15. It
is beautiful. I've been there, to visit yourself, but also, as we mentioned earlier on, the SBSE Northwest peer group, you help facilitate that connection. They meet there monthly as well in one of the boardrooms, and it is absolutely beautiful. Last time I visited, well, there's 2 reasons I visit. 3, I should say, if I count seeing you and Robert as well. Which, of course, I come all that way to you. The great pizza, but also the wonderful architecture and the wonderful historical touches. And I think it was yourself and Rob pointed out to me, they've got replicas of the original carpets and some of the furniture that's in there. They've recovered.
Yeah, the boardroom table, actually, there's a white plaque on the wall because it's a unique piece of art. Yes. So when the Co-op moved in, they built in a load of bespoke art. And then when they moved out, they just left it there as part of the building. So Richard's inherited this kind of uniquely furnished. I think the old girl is 28 years old this year, but it's still a marvellous office.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. So you mentioned Richard Tang, who's the CEO of Zen Internet. You've become friends with Richard, as well as Zen Internet being a great partner for Myson. Zen, for anybody perhaps unaware of them, are consistently rated the top internet service provider in the UK. They, really, if anything that David spoke about here, about the culture, about caring resonates, Zen is that ISP, and they've got exactly that same outlook as well. Yeah. And in fact, thanks to your introduction, Richard Tang, that is, will be a guest on Tubb Talk in the next few weeks as well. So appreciate you making that introduction. But what have you learned from working alongside Richard and the Zen Internet people?
One of the most biggest things that stands out is that he's heading towards about 600 people now, I think. But if you spoke to anybody at Zen, you would know they're from Zen. Now, I struggle doing that with 15. I think I've cracked it with 15. I have no idea how you scale that out to that number of people. But anybody you speak to at their place, you know that they work for Zen. And they all kind of line up the same way. They all have the same beliefs and the same strategy. And that's probably down to one of Richard's core things, that he puts people before profit. But he also has a saying that says, happy staff, happy suppliers, happy customers. And if you've noticed, the customer is king thing is completely at odds with that, because the customer is third. And he's saying, if I keep my staff happy, and I look after the people who supply the stuff that we sell, then the customers will be happy, because the top 2 will get the third one right. And so many businesses, basically, that customer is king, whatever they say they get. There's an element of that you should always try and do right by your customers. But he said, well, I'm going to get there by investing in the staff. So he'll tell you next week how he does that. And it's great how we do it. But they do it year in, year out. It's not a fluke, and it's not something that they're losing touch with. We can meet any member of their staff, and it's a Zen Internet member of staff.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing.
Well, listeners, you can hear more about Zen Internet coming up in the next episode of Tubb Talk, because we're going to be interviewing Richard Tang. Thanks from the from the introduction from Dave here, so I appreciate that. Now, on the subject of mentors, coaches, we talked about people of that ilk. I know you're a big believer in engaging in external experts to learn from, both yourself and for the business. So give us an insight. What coaches do you work with at the moment, and how do they benefit you and the business?
Well, around about 10 years ago, after I'd bought my original business partner out, because we had got to a stage where he was later on in life, I was still with a young family and wanted to grow the business, and our probably horizons were different ones. I found myself waking up on a January morning thinking, right, here's another year at Myson. Oh, hang on, is it another year like last year? And then have I got another 15 of these to go? And it was like, there must be more to life than this, because we kind of know what this is already, but how do we kind of keep this fresh and keep this interesting? One of my clients recommended me to a taster session for an organisation called Strategic Coach, which if you want to go and Google that, you'll come across a guy called Dan Sullivan, who is based out of Canada these days. It's a global coaching company, and I now attend, for the last 10 years, once a quarter, I go down to London and I'm on a coaching course with other entrepreneurs who are outside the MSP space. In fact, there's very few IT people there. And I found that's a great way to look at business and look at learning and shared experience. So there's lots of stuff you learn on the course, but also that's 50% of it. That's the bit you pay for. The other bit you don't pay for is that over those 10 years, you then end up in a community of other people who can share ideas and support you and give you advice, and there's friendships that come out of that as well. So I was there last week. I was actually visiting a separate coaching course from mine, because I couldn't attend mine because my son graduated. So I was with 30 people in a different room, some of which I'd met before, different coach, but what a great day. Everything that we talked about on the day really maps into what I'm doing at Myson at the minute. And I find it's just 4 days a year where I step out of the business, I look at the business, I work on it, and I come back with a load of energy that I would never have had. It's like going to the petrol station and coming away with a full tank. Or, if we're a bit more ecologically sound, plugging in and charging up the battery.
I love it. And that lesson, I think, is absolutely key. We've already alluded to the fact, running an MSP business on your own can be really a lonely, challenging job. Being an employer can be challenging as well. The buck stops with you. So community, brilliant, for helping support you. Your peers can do a good job there. But having a coach, have a mentor, other peers that you can go to for that, not just support, but the accountability as well, to make sure that you get stuff done, that the wheels are not just turning. Huge believer in that.
Yeah, and I also find that you end up being that person to other people as well.
Yeah.
Which is, once you realise you have that other value, it just gives you a bit more confidence in what you're doing and a bit more belief. In fact, one of the things that we did on a coaching course some years ago, we were asked to reflect on all those people you'd met through your career who, if you'd not kind of had that interaction or that time working together or something happened that kind of, change your career direction. And, write a letter to them, even if you never post it, thanking them for what they did. So I've got a number of people that I met. So one of the first was a lady called Anne Parr at SEMA Group. Then I met a guy called David Brereton at British Nuclear Fuels. I worked for a guy called Neil Greatrex at Barracudas. And I've not seen any of them for years, but they are people that if I'd not met, I wouldn't be here where I am now. And what I now try to do is to be that person to some of the younger lads who work for me, to say, well, instead of just employing them, can I be the guy who kind of points them in the direction that they can get to? And, at some stage, if I lose them because they're going on to bigger and greater things, then so be it. But, it's all about them, not about me.
Yeah, and that all goes towards your legacy. And I want to revisit the subject of legacy very shortly. But something you mentioned earlier about how Myson and yourself have embraced the EOS, the traction methodology. So, for listeners who aren't familiar with it, explain to us, what is EOS? What does it stand for? What is traction? How can it help MSPs?
EOS is the entrepreneur's operating system, and if you read a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, it's an operating system for any business, not necessarily MSPs, but it's a way to actually run your business, structure your meetings, look at your values, decide where you're going, setting budgets, etc., etc. Now, we're at the start of our traction journey, and it's something that we've had probably 3 meetings about already, but it's probably going to take us 18 months to get there. But I'm going to use it as a way to leave some processes and structure in the business for a day when I'm not there. Because now we've got 25 years in the bag. I realise there's not going to be another 25 years with me doing this. There might be another 5, there might be another 10. So I need to leave something there that puts something in place that allows the leadership team that we've got and the great guys who already work in the business to take things forward. And I'm a big believer in serendipity. So we were down at a PAX 8 masterclass in Bristol, and Ian Groves from StartTech was there, and along with Owen Williams and a few others. And this was the night before we did the session. And one of Myson's earliest jobs was working in Bristol with AXA. So at the end of the meal the night before the masterclass, somebody said, "Do anybody know a good pub?" And I said, "Well, I know one, because we used to call it the staff room." So there's this tramcar pub that we went to, and we sat down, myself and Jack from Myson, and about 5 or 6 other people, Ian, Owen, and a few others, and we realised that we were the only people that hadn't implemented traction. And now Ian, as he always does, is a big evangelist for traction, because it's done wonders for his business. Spent the time talking to us, and I was thinking, I'm now sat in the pub where Myson basically started. I've now got somebody telling me traction. Now, I've known about traction for 5 years. Gino Wickman's actually on Strategic Coach over in Canada. Loads of people in Coach have done traction, and it was like, finally, Dave, will you wake up? This is what you need to do. So we're now doing traction, and the sessions we've done so far have been brilliant, because you get to find out, what it is you should be doing as a company. We already know we've got great people and a great culture, so we've ticked some of the boxes ahead of schedule, and we're going to follow that process through. But that will be the tool that allows the company to live on longer than me being there.
Yeah, and traction has really taken hold in the MSP industry, hasn't it? You said Ian Groves, others, huge advocates for it. If you're listening to this, unfamiliar with traction, go and check out the book. We'll include links in the show notes to EOS and SBSC Northwest and Enable and all the different acronyms and names we've mentioned here. So please don't worry about that. We'll include all the links. Let's return, though, to legacy. So you shared earlier some of the life events that have helped shape who you and the business are. You and I have talked privately about legacy. We've both lost parents. That had a profound impact on how we view, for want of a better word, our life goals, what we want to make of ourselves. So how, at this stage of your career, you mentioned you're 54 now, you've got a 25-year successful business. How would you describe your legacy plans, and how are they coming along?
Well, bizarrely, after we had a big nice party on a Sunday on a steam train, having Sunday lunch, that was kind of, 25 years tick, that's kind of now in the past. We actually did it on the day of our incorporation, 25 years to the day, so it was really neat and tidy. But all of a sudden I've woken up with a kind of I might have 5 years. I might have 5 years and another 5 years where I'm kind of knocking about. But really, the clock's now ticking. So all the things that we never did before, I now want to do. So I kind of said to you at lunch that having a really strong culture is a great way of not knowing quite a lot of stats about your business, some of the key numbers that if most people asked me what they were, I wouldn't have a clue. And ironically, it's not that I've not got a clue. Nobody's got a clue, because we've got a culture that kind of papers over those cracks, because we're all together, we're all pulling the same way. So, but now with 5 years to go, all those numbers are now starting to become important. So my kind of legacy plan is to make myself not responsible for anything in 5 years. So to have no responsibilities, but I can still be there and maybe transition to a chairman role. But in doing that, the legacy of that is to bring and develop those people through who quite clearly can do some of the things that I'm doing. And also at this time of life, bringing through the younger generation and giving them the opportunity that somebody gave me, and broadening things out into some of the kind of charitable stuff that we now do, where we see that as just as an important part. People say, well, will you come and help garden at the weekend at the hospice and help tidy this bed? Well, yeah, I could do that, but actually what's probably more valuable for the hospice is for us to do a load of IT stuff that we can, or convince our friends at Zen to give them a load of stuff on for free, and bring our volunteering in that route. So it's all about, at the minute, kind of trying to extract me out of the business, but in doing that, not leaving a void and leaving the right people in place and giving those people the opportunity to grow into that. Because I've not got to where I have on my own. It's partly their success anyhow. So it should be their success going forward. And I've got people who are working for me who are 20. So I've got a whole range of years of experience who will still need a job when I'm gone. And hopefully we can continue Myson along the values that kind of there now.
I find that so inspiring, absolutely inspiring. I will pick up on something you said. You mentioned the word charity there. I don't want to make you blush, not virtue signaling or anything like that, but you do an incredible amount of work for charity in very innovative ways as well. So tell us about some of the charity challenges that you've taken on board, because you don't. I know you raise a lot of money for your chosen charities. You do a lot of good work, but you do it in such a fun way that people can't help but take notice of it. So tell us about some of the charity challenges.
Yeah, I think whenever we do anything, we're trying to get as many people as involved as possible, and we don't want it necessarily to be, the people who are fit enough to do that or can do that. So a couple of years, so just to illustrate this, our main charity is the local hospice, and we actually do their IT now, and we extracted them from a rather cumbersome contract with the NHS, which seemed to suck all the money out of them but deliver no value whatsoever. So it's great to be involved and see them realise that there was a different kind of IT support out there. But we've tried to say, well, if they're paying us money, can we try and give them as much of it back by doing something once a year? So the first year we did the Yorkshire Three Peaks. We took a team of 9, which actually included Richard from Zen, who he led us a bit of a merry dance, because he kind of said, well, I've done some walking, I've not done much. To kind of shortcut it, he actually finished first. He walked around in the rain ahead of everybody else. In his rucksack, he had a drone because he was going to film us, but the weather was that bad that he never made it out of his rucksack. But he then went and made a 20-minute YouTube video that's on his YouTube channel of us doing the walk, and he acted as documentary filmmaker and narrator, and it was just like, it was completely unexpected, but he just did it because he wanted to. So we did that, the Three Peaks, and we raised quite a lot of money for that. And then the next year it was like, well, some guys were saying, we'll do the national Three Peaks now. I was thinking, well, this doesn't really work for the people who didn't want to do the Three Peaks in the first place. They probably certainly don't want to do this 24-hour England, Scotland, Wales thing. So we came up with another idea that we'd climb Everest instead, which sounds...
Let's pause there for a moment. So you just said that we don't want to go from the Three Peaks to something outrageous. We're going to climb Everest. However, listener, hold on here. There is a punchline at the end of it.
Yeah, so Zen's building has a fantastic spiral staircase in the middle of it, which is 39 feet in height. And we worked out that if we did, I think it was it 740 odd flights of stairs between us, that would equate to Everest. But we also worked out what the local Three Peaks, because there's 3 hills in Rochdale, what the Yorkshire Three Peaks and what the national Three Peaks, what you would have to do. So we had a challenge that anybody could have a go at. So we had a couple of customers come who found out that their knee operations that they've not had, they should have had by now, but they gave it their all. And we have other members of the team who let's just say that walking probably wasn't their favourite thing, but gave it their all, and still managed 20 or 30 ascents. We had a couple of guys who managed Ben Nevis. I think I managed Snowdon. But as a team, we spent an entire Saturday going up this spiral staircase, and we actually live streamed it on YouTube. And we all had orange T-shirts on, and somebody did a comment that said it looked like watching goldfish in a bowl, because we were actually coming down the stairs at the back. You can't watch it on YouTube because we also had the radio on, so obviously, inevitably, within a week, it was taken down for copyright reasons. Yeah. But yeah, we streaming it on YouTube meant that we got far more donations, but it was great. I mean, at one stage in the middle of the afternoon, we were actually running up the stairs to see who could run up the quickest. Sunday was fine. Monday, when we all came to work, everybody's hamstrings were half the size they were. Nobody could walk anymore. But again, we raised a decent amount of money for a very good cause.
I saw Kara Swisher, who's a noted US tech journalist, on stage at CompTIA ChannelCon the other week, and she was talking, she's covered the IT industry in all of its depths for many, many years, and she said something that absolutely cracked me up. She said remember when Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk were on about boxing matches and things like that, and she said, you people, talking about the IT industry as a whole, you're not athletes. That's just reminded me of what you said. However, a remarkable thing to do. I remember watching the live stream of it. It was actually really compelling, and I didn't think you were goldfish at all. But you do just incredible work for charity. You do it in such a fun way as well. So a public thank you for everything you do. I know you've connected me before with food banks and IT recycling schemes and things of that nature as well. So I always try and shine a light out. But when I think of people within the IT industry who do great work for charity, you're the first person I think of. So public thank you for everything you and the Myson team do there. After 25 years, you've been running Myson Pages for that long now. How do you ensure that running an MSP business doesn't become a slog? Because you alluded to it earlier, it could easily do that. And people listening to this might have been running a business for a long time and just thinking, oh my goodness, same thing, each year in and out. So how do you make sure you and your team still enjoy what you do?
I think there's always something that's... IT, we're blessed in an industry where things change so quickly that there's always something new to learn. So that willingness to learn and looking for that next opportunity is what now makes that a thing. There are other industries where you think, well, you're not doing anything different than you would have been doing 25 years ago. You're just doing more of the same. But we've got this never-ending conveyor belt of new stuff to have a go at. Now, I will qualify that by saying there are some people in the IT space who have a go at every new bit of new stuff immediately and seem to be kind of jacks of all trades and masters of none. So what we tend to do is we tend to look at the stuff that's in our stack, as we call it in the industry, and we kind of rate where we are with things. What do they get? A mark out of 10. And occasionally we will probably review and change some bits of that stack as and when they're needed. So we're always looking at the next thing. So we've just moved our accounts to a cloud-hosted package, which has driven a different integration between ConnectWise, and so we've had to go and find another third-party tool that'll do that. So that's been quite involved. We're looking at our current quoting tool. We quite like our current quoting tool. We're looking at new ones that have come on the market. We're looking at the differences in price and saying there's really no need to move because that does what it does, but that does a few extra bits. But is it really worth that amount of money? We'll get there, and that might be a 6 to 9 months journey. But whatever we're doing for our customers day to day, there is a whole set of stuff in the background that we're always looking at. So Jack, who works quite closely with me, we gave him the initial title of Business Improvement Manager or Business Development Manager. And that's both internal and external. So it's about growing our brand and doing a little bit of... We don't do sales, but he seems to sell quite a few bits of pieces. But one of his other things is looking at what we do internally and saying, how can we do that better than we do it now? So is that better use of some of the tools that we're using? Or is it actually, that's the wrong tool, let's use something else? Right. So there's that forever, never-ending conversation about what's there, what's coming. And And I think it means it's almost like, a chameleon shedding its skin. Are we the same company that we were 25 years ago? I think I've argued there's been 4 versions of Myson, and we're probably entering into a 5th now. But for most people, most people who I know outside of work, I've done the same thing for 25 years. But it's changed. It changes all the time.
Yeah. So you enjoy the change, you instill a culture of the team enjoying change, not change for change's sake, but you're always looking to innovate, and that keeps things interesting, and that's where the fun comes from.
Yeah, I think if you're close to that, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. And I think a great lesson for anybody listening to this who's perhaps been doing the managed service thing for a long time. I was in America a few weeks ago, David, in Atlanta for CompTIA ChannelCon, and I was having a conversation with some of the elder statesmen of our industry, and they were saying how disappointing or how sad it is when they come across people who bemoan change. It's because you're actually, if you don't like change, you are in the wrong industry here, because the managed service industry is change, isn't it? The whole thing. So I love what you've done. You've reframed that and said, this is fun, not change for change's sake, but innovation is fun, isn't it?
Well, it's a never-ending source of the next thing, of power, of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. We could talk all day, mate. I know we could, but you've got some important meetings to go to up here in the Northeast. So as we draw a close to our conversation, what advice would you give to any MSPs listening on building a successful MSP business in a similar way to the way you have at Myson Pages?
Yeah, I think if you find yourself creating something with a set of values that are for work that don't match the values that you have personally, then you're the person who's got to be at work. You've got to be in conflict with yourself every day long. So create something that makes you happy. Create something that, reflects who you are. Sell those values to people who work with you, and if you can share that set of values and people buy into it, your customers will love it and your staff will love it. It's that simple.
It's that simple. I've been wanting you on the podcast for a long, long time. I consider you a friend. We've chatted in the industry. We've worked alongside each other. So I knew what you'd got to offer. I think you have going to made a whole raft of new raving fans just from speaking so openly and honestly as you've done in this podcast, as you do anytime. Anybody who knows you knows you're a go-giver. You share openly, freely, give your time and experience to help others. So thank you for coming on the show today. It has been an absolute thrill to have you on. And for anybody who wants to continue the conversation, maybe been inspired by what you say, what's the best way for them to find you online to continue the conversation?
You can drop me an email at david@mysonpages.com. I think that's fairly obvious, but you can find me at LinkedIn. You can probably find me on Twitter still, just about. I've called it Twitter. It's not called X.
It's Twitter, Elon. It's Twitter. I'm sorry.
I used to love Twitter, but I'm kind of...
Not so much anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, LinkedIn or the email. I'm happy to talk.
We'll include all of David's details in the show notes for this episode. So go to www.tubblog.co.uk to find the associated blog post for this episode. But it's been an absolute thrill. Before you go, I'm going to be interviewing your good friends and somebody we've spoke about on this podcast here, Richard Tang, the CEO of Zen Internet, in a week's time. And you've come down to the Northeast from Rochdale. I'm going the opposite direction to catch up with you, Robert Gibbons, and Richard Tang to interview in the Zen Internet offices. So Tubb Talk listeners, if you're interested in that one, and why wouldn't you be, given the preamble that we've given it in advance, that's going to be released in the next episode. You know Richard well. What one question would you recommend that I, as the interviewer, ask Richard?
I think we mentioned it earlier on. You've got to ask him how he makes sure that everybody who works for him is a Zen person. How do you do that? Because I think if any business could crack that, if John Lewis could crack that, if I nearly said WH Smith now, but they still exist.
They still exist, yeah.
Yeah, but if any business could make sure that everybody who worked for him had their values and came across and did their thing, then that's dynamite.
I will ask him that question. You can hear that on the next episode, dear listener. Thank you for joining us today. And Dave Brereton, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rick.
Cheers.
Enjoyed it. Cheers.
Hey folks, Richard here. Thanks for listening today. I know you've got a ton of options for who you listen to nowadays, so I really appreciate your support. Do you have any feedback on this episode? Ideas for future guests? Tweet me at Tubblog using the hashtag TubbTalk. I respond to every tweet and really appreciate your feedback.